Commuters flock to bus terminals and taxi ranks in a last-minute dash to visit various holiday destinations. And the Democratic Republic of Congo is heading to presidential, parliamentary and local elections this coming Wednesday. A very good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you very much for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. You can interact with us on social media platforms. It's at Week Ahead, and our hashtag is The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabala. Leading our bulletin this hour, the SABC says it's investigating allegations of ghost workers being paid in its news division. Now, this follows allegations that surfaced through an anonymous email on social media regarding the payment of ghost workers. The SABC says one of the managers under investigation has tendered a resignation with immediate effect, while other staff members are facing disciplinary processes. The SABC Group Executive for News and Current Affairs, Mushweshwe Munare, has launched an extensive investigation into freelance contracts that turned out to be irregular, corrupt and fraudulent. The SABC is appealing to the public to refrain from distributing the fake email that contains unverified information. To this story now, scores of commuters have flocked to bus terminals and taxi ranks in a last-minute dash to visit their loved ones. SABC senior news reporter Griselda Lewis visited a taxi rank in Johannesburg and spoke to some of them.
So many of Johannesburg's taxi ranks are full to capacity as thousands of commuters make their way to go and visit their families or loved ones in various parts around the country. Some tell me they've been saving the entire year for this moment. It's chock-a-block around Johannesburg's transport hubs as commuters try to squeeze in as much as they can for the long trek home for some. Well, this man says he's traveling with his family. He hopes they will arrive safe at their destination. He says the taxi drivers have been great, and he says those staying behind must have a good festive season. This lady says she's so happy that she's going home to spend time with family. This lady says she's taking her grandchild home to Tabanchu and he's going to spend time with his family. Well, this lady says she's going home to visit her grandparents. Others are also traveling for love. Well, this man says he's traveling all the way to Lesotho because his love is there. And those tasked with getting millions around safely say it's a hectic time as usual. Well, he says he respects his passengers and he's here because of them. He's also asking them to respect him. He says he will drive very carefully, but has also cautioned some of them not to drink too much in the taxis.
Etc. Amaningi. And then from there we make sure that our passengers are all the time happy because we are people of the taxi rank because of the people, passengers.
In a last-minute dash ahead of Christmas. Griselda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.
Let's take you to the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where the National Independent Electoral Commission in that country has confirmed that citizens from 2 regions in the country will not participate in the upcoming elections. It says this is due to the war that is raging in those areas. The DRC is heading to presidential, parliamentary and local elections this coming Wednesday. Didaba Tsotsetsi filed this report from Kinshasa.
The National Independent Electoral Commission says in these elections, more people have registered to vote than the previous polls. It says that 26 presidential candidates will contest the top position, while 27,000 parliamentary candidates will be vying for 500 seats.
If you look at 2018, people were disallowed Some even went in exile. They could not stand as candidates. This time around, everyone who wanted to be a candidate is a candidate. To the extent that we have 26 presidential candidates, and we have all together, if you take all the 4 polls, we are going to have 100,000 candidates, which is huge. That's the size of the population of Seychelles. You see, that's the number of our candidates in this country. So it shows that actually in 2018, because we always have to compare, there were 35,000 candidates. Now it's 100,000, which is threefold increment, which means also a lot of work for us.
The war in the eastern part of the country remains a thorny issue. It has affected the Commission's work to access potential voters for the upcoming elections. More than 1 million people have left their homes and some of them are not going to vote.
We have a lot of instability, a lack of security in the east of the country, but particularly in 2 areas, one called Masisi, the other one called Rutshuru. It's in North Kivu province. We are not going to hold elections there because we didn't conduct voter registration because of the violence. We were unable to carry out our work there. So the elections in those 2 areas plus one other area called Kwamut in Western Congo are not going to hold elections. So it will happen everywhere else but in those 3 districts.
The country has pinned its hopes to SADC deployment to provide security during elections for safety of voters.
Today, with the Nairobi process, we are trying now to convince them to stop fighting, to lay down their gun, because we have in the process of the disarmament, a program of disarmament, reinsertion of this group. That's what is taking place now. So most of the group, I will tell you, that are involved in this program, except this group of terrorists of MT23, but we are dealing with them. We will deal with them seriously, and more now that all our troops coming from the training are deployed now in the whole Congo. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the SADC Election Observation Mission says currently voting material is being delivered to different parts of the country.
Now, voting equipment. As of today, I'm aware of some helicopters that have been provided to take equipment to those areas that had not received them. Maybe not sufficient, but certainly they were expecting helicopters which have been provided. And as we sit here, those helicopters are busy transporting the equipment.
The Electoral Commission has assured Congolese that it will deliver free, fair and credible elections. Ditabo Tsotetsi, SABC News, Kinshasa, DRC.
The governments of Botswana as well as Namibia are embarking on a bilateral project to construct a railway line linkage between the 2 countries. The Kalahari Railway project will run about 1,500 kilometers from the coalfields at Mambulo in Botswana to the port of Walvis Bay in Namibia. The objective of the project is to transport coal and other commodities to the overseas market through ports in Namibia. Now, this comes as South Africa battles logistics inefficiencies hindering economic activity.
The project is still in its early stages, with reports of 12 international companies having expressed interest to build the railway line between Botswana and Namibia in a public-private partnership. It's expected the development phase for the project will begin in January of 2025. The Botswana Chamber of Mines, dependent on transportation to move its goods to markets, says while the 2 countries have attempted to build this before and failed due to affordability factors, they are confident that the recent attempt to build the Kalahari railway line will succeed. They say the success of this project would improve connectivity in Southern Africa and enable them to move goods efficiently to different markets.
Botswana is a landlocked country. As you know, we don't have a single port that we can put to the name of Botswana, but we use all countries that do have ports and are surrounding us. And therefore, that to us is, and we have obviously been using to a greater extent the ports in South Africa to this. But it doesn't mean that opening the Kalahari, we will be diverting away from South African ports. All it does, it gives the opportunity for, transporting goods in different directions at any given point in time.
Siwawa says while the logistics challenges experienced in South Africa have impacted their movement of goods, they are hopeful that this will be resolved and they can continue using South Africa and other neighboring countries as routes to export and import goods.
We always pin the hope that the challenges facing Transnet, freight trade, can be resolved at the earliest opportunity. And because, if you look at Transnet freight trade, it's a great opportunity to generate revenue, not only for South Africa, but for the rest of the region. So it is our hope that, the challenges that we see affecting Transnet trade currently will be of a temporary nature, and that we can be able to move, past that hurdle and get Transnet freight rail to move once more. Yes, it has affected us in a way.
Botswana exports mainly diamonds, copper, nickel, as well as beef and textiles. South Africa's total trade with Botswana stands at over 87 billion rand, with imports from Botswana at just 11 billion rand and export to the country at over 76 billion rand. Loras Sefakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, more news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, one of the country's most watched murder trials, the killing of soccer star Senzo Meyiwa, had to start afresh this year. This after the presiding Judge Chipua Mahumela stepped down due to ill health and Judge Ratam Kgwatling took over. Now, some of the occupants who were inside the house on the day Meyiwa was killed back in October of 2014 took the stand. Neighbors told of what they heard, and startling revelations were made of alleged links between Kelly Khumalo and some of the accused. 5 men are currently on trial for Meyiwa's murder.
So after more than a year and several witnesses taking the stand, the trial had to begin afresh. And it started with lots of tears, denials and accusations. Zandi Khumalo, the sister of Meyiwa's then girlfriend Kelly Khumalo, was first on the stand and described the moment 2 intruders allegedly entered the house. Well, she told the court the first one was carrying a gun, demanded cell phones and money.
Senjalo ke lo ophambili wama-threats wasethi wasikhomba ngesibhamu esethi khiphani imali namafoni.
And then the one that was in front then pointed us with a firearm and then told us or ordered us to take out money and phones.
Which language was he using?
Wayesebenzisa luphi ulimi?
Wakhuluma isiZulu.
He spoke in isiZulu.
And then kwathi makusenjalo uKelly wabaleka ongena ekamereni.
Was at that Kelly ran into the bedroom.
Ikamera ongilana.
My bedroom.
Base kuthi uKelly mayisengena ekamereni and then lo mlisa wesibili owayeme ngasekitchen wamlandela uKelly evala umnyango yena efuna ukuvula.
And then when Kelly ran into the bedroom, the second gentleman that was standing next to the kitchen then followed him. Kelly was closing the door and he was trying to open it.
And then ithema kusenjalo sasukuma sonke and then safike sadlula nalo obelisa umnyango kaKelly sekamereni and then samthatha naye wama-threats sabaphushela bonke ukuya ngasemnyango wasekitchen.
Uthi namdlula lo ebephusha umnyango.
Sithathile naye sahamba naye samdudulela emnyango wasekitchen.
And we then all of us then stood up. We then pushed them, that is now both the gentlemen together with the one that was struggling with Kelly for the door, and pushed both of them to the kitchen.
And then after a scuffle ensued in the kitchen, gunshots went off.
Was at that I then heard a firearm went off.
And then I figure
Just a minute, where did it go off?
Yeah, sakuma kuphi? The one with the dreadlocks, the one where the firearm was coming from here, pointing at the door, there's number 2 and 4 to 15.
And then ukuthe kusenjalo mangisizwa isibhamu siqhuma ngezwa into eshaya phansi kwaphuma isibaki sangishaya enyaweni lami laka right.
When the firearm went off, I then heard something hitting the floor, and then the spark went off, and then it hit me on my foot.
And then uthe kusenjalo kwaukuthi kusho ukuthi mina noDumile sizinto eyodwa sabaleka umkanye wangena ekamereni mina ngangena ebathroom.
When I heard that hitting the floor, it so happened that Tumelo also heard it, so that we heard the same thing. Okay. I ran into the bathroom and he ran into the bedroom.
Well, Khumalo says she then heard more gunshots go off.
And then uthe makusuka lapho ngezwa futhi sesikhala okwesithathu kodwa kulokhu asenzanga umsindo kufana nalokho okunye kokuqala.
From there I heard the firearm going off for the third time, but now at that time it didn't the sound was not as the first one.
After Khumalo came out of the bathroom, she described how she found Meyiwa bleeding on the floor and how when she tried to dial 10-111, had mental block, and then ran to tell a neighbor what had happened.
Then kuthe mangifika lapha ngizojoina uma noSenzo noKelly laba mekhona mangithi ngiyabheka ngabona ukuthi uSenzo uyableed.
When I got there to join my mother, Kelly and Senzo, I then saw that Senzo was bleeding.
He's bleeding where? Where on his body?
Nice fubeni.
Here in his chest, the witness indicating.
And then ngithe makusenjalo ngakhumbula ukuthi ifoni yami ngiyifihle emveni kwe-cushion.
Was that I then remembered that I had hidden my phone behind the cushion.
And then ngaphuthuma ngawuphakamisa u-cushion ngayithola vele ukuthi isakhona lapho ngathi ngiyazama ukudayila u-10-111 ingqondo yavele yafreeze.
I then rushed to there and found that my phone was still there. I tried to dial 10-111, but my mind just froze.
Angikwazi ukudayila. And then ngaphuma ngayefuna usizo ngaphandle.
I then realized that I was unable to make a call or to dial. I then went out to go and get help from outside.
Ngagijima ngaya kumngani kama uMaphiri ohlala opposite ngaphuma ngegate.
Maphiri. I then rushed to or ran out of the gate to my mother's friend Maphiri.
Mage ngegate ngeza kwaMaphiri mangifika khona la estradini kwakunemoto eyayipake lapho la ngabona khona uMthapseni.
Okay. I then came out of the gate as I was approaching Maphiri's house, and then I saw a vehicle there in the street where I saw Mthabiseng.
And then ngabona ukuthi ubhizi khona umuntu ayikhuluma naye khona emotweni ngadlula nganqamulela ngayendlini straight.
I then could see that she was busy. There was someone she was talking to, and then I went straight to the house.
Which house?
Indlu kaMaphiri.
Maphiri's house.
And then a bombshell. Khumalo pointed out accused number 2 Bongani Ntanzi as one of the alleged intruders that was inside the house on that day.
Now, ever since the day of the incident, have you ever seen the people who intruded in the house?
Suka ngaleli langa ke lesigameko ke ingabe wababona futhi noma wababona futhi laba abantu abangena endlini.
Ngibone nje la icourt kuphela.
Only here in court.
Yes, can you explain what you mean?
Ungasho ukuthi usho ukuthini? Ungachaza ukuthi usho ukuthini?
Ecourt njengoba ngilana ngibone nangu ubhuti lapha.
As I'm here in court, ngakhomba kanjalo, I saw the gentleman here.
Which one is it?
Umuphi?
From your left is accused 1 up to accused 5.
Uma uqala ngaku left accused 1 kuyo egcineni ke uyo accused 5.
Accused 2.
Umsolwa wesibili.
You saw as which person?
Umbone yena nanjengomuphi umuntu?
As suspect number 2.
As suspect number 2.
But Khumalo was also grilled on why she never previously described accused number 2's height, body and facial features in any of the statements to police, but did so during that testimony in court.
All the statements, if I remind you, and we can go back to them, you've never ever, to the police from the 27th of October 2017 until the 18th when you made your last statement, you made 3 statements to the police. You've never ever given them the facial features of the person that you say was the second suspect.
Okokuqala statement njengoba sengishilo statement sokuqala esasenza yebo umuntu wayengaphansi kokuthuka nakho konke lokho, but esesibili i-additional statement kwakuyimbuzo uphendula umbuzo, so if lo mbuzo awufikanga kumina bengeza ukuphendula.
Firstly,
ngawutholanga lapho.
The first statement was when one was still shocked or under shock, and the second statement or the additional statement then, it was a question would be posed, and then I would then answer. If that question then never reached me or that question was never posed to me, then I would not get to that.
While the defense also suggested that there was an altercation between herself and her then boyfriend, Longwe Twala, which resulted in the soccer star being shot dead. Well, the defense said a witness would be called who will testify that Meyiwa's friend Tumelo Madlala told that witness that the deceased was hit by a bullet while trying to intervene in a fight between Khumalo and Twala.
Now, this witness basically would come and tell this court, because the state is going to call him, will come and tell this court that on the date of the happening of this incident, he got a call from your sister Kelly.
Lo fakazi uzoza ke azotshela ke ngoba bazombiza ke azotshela inkantolo ukuthi ngelanga ekwenzeka ngaso isigameko ekwenzeka ngalo isigameko lesi wathola ke ucingo olubuya kudadewenu uKelly.
Unfortunately, as she tried to explain what was happening, there was a conversation breakdown. When they tried to call her back, they couldn't reach her.
Ngeshwa ke esachaza ke noma esazama ukuthi achaze ukuthi kwenzakalani kwase kukhona nje ukunqamuka ke kwinkulumo leyo yabo uma esezama ke ukuthi abuyele kuyena ke akazange amthole.
Subsequent, they then phoned Tumelo Madlala.
Base ke emuva kwalokho ke befonela yena uTumelo Madlala.
And Tumelo Madlala informed him, now this witness whose identity we would not disclose.
Wase ke uTumelo etshela lo fakazi lona engithi ke igama lakhe alichaziwe.
That Senzo has been hit by a bullet.
Ukuthi ke uSenzo ushaywe inhlamvu.
And this happened as Senzo was trying to intervene or separate a fight that was happening between yourself and Longwe.
Futhi ke lokho kwenzeka kathi ke uSenzo ezama ukuthi avimbeke noma ahlukaniseke ifight noma ukulwa ke okwakukhona phakathi kwakho kanye noLongwe.
That is the information that is contained in the statement. Do you have any comment, ma'am?
Iloko ke okukulesi statement ingaba khona yini ofisa ukusho?
Okokuqala mina noLongwe sasingalo.
Firstly, Longwe and myself were not fighting.
Sasi happy kabi mina noLongwe we were in a very good space.
We were very happy, myself and Longwe. We were in a very good space.
Kuze ngimeme ukuthi aze ekhaya lokho kuchaza ukuthi sase right mina naye.
For me to have invited him to come to my home, yes. That explains that myself and him things were good between the two of us.
Yes.
So lesho yo manje hayi angiyazi.
So that which is being said now, I know nothing about.
But one of the Khumalo neighbors, Kaya Ngache, who was next on the stand, described hearing loud sounds coming from the Khumalo home on the night of that tragedy.
That initial noise that you heard, that made you to look through your bedroom window, can you describe it?
Yabona lo msindo ke oke wawuzwa phambeleni. Ungakwazi ukuthi mhlambe usinikeze ke umfanekiso wa lo msindo.
Okay, umsindo lo wangeza ukuthi ngiyefestereni. Because ngicala ngezwe commotion or kushawutwana or ngathi kuyaphushwana.
Now, the noise that prompted me to go to the window was some commotion. It appears as though people were pushing each other.
So kahle into eya catch attention eyaba loud wakhala umnyango like umnyango ngathi uvaleka kabuhlungu.
Now, what caught my attention the most is that there was a sound of a banging door. As though the door was being roughly closed.
Well, a close friend of Meyiwa, Mthokozisi Twala, also took the stand and testified about how two alleged intruders entered the house and also described Meyiwa's last moments. But the defense accused him of lying.
I put it to you that the deceased was shot at by one of the persons who were inside the house. Obviously not the children, and he did not shoot at himself. There was no robbery there, and he was not shot at by one of the intruders who had the firearm.
Okay, akazange adutyulwe yilaba ababili abangena. Akukho kubanjwa kwenkunzi kwakukhona laphayana akadutshulwanga. Ingane siyayikhipha ke ingane lezi eziwu2 naye siyamkhipha. Wadutshulwa-ke omunye walaba ababephakathi endlini. Ukhiphe laba abawu2 kuthiwa bangena babengekho uthi ababengekho abangena. Akunankunzi eyabanjwa ubakhiphe nabantwana naye umkhiphi. Yilaba abanye-ke okusho ukuthi laba abanye-ke babesendlini.
Hence ngisho ukuthi akulona iqiniso lelo.
Hence I'm saying that is not the truth.
Abantu abawu2 bangena lapha endlini.
There were 2 intruders.
And I don't understand ukuthi mina ngaze ngivikele umuntu wayilapha endlini ngamvikelelani over umuntu omngani wami uSenzo. Akunandaba nawo wonke umuntu wayilapha endlini.
Yes, I'm saying that.
Ngidideka khona mhlawumbe engihlezi ngidideka khona ngempela.
And so I'm then saying that we're going to still be here for a very long time. I have absolutely no reason to defend anyone or to protect anyone that was in the house because I have no business with them over my friend.
And questioned his version of events where he claimed that he was chased by the second intruder who was carrying a knife.
And you say you cannot describe the knife in which the second intruder possessed.
Yes.
Then I'm saying to you, you cannot give the description of the knife the alleged second intruder possessed because there was no second intruder who entered the house.
Mina ngithi kuwena-ke isizathu noma imbangela yokuthi-ke lowo meso lowo-ke ungawukwazi-ke ukuthi uchaze yingoba kwakungekho msolwa-ke noma muntu wesibili lapho futhi wayephethe ummese.
Engingakusho-ke mina ukuthi wayekhona umuntu wesibili wayephethe ummese. Ngingavele ngithi wayengekho nje umuntu ngobani. Wayekhona umuntu wesibili wayephethe ummese and uyena lo waphuma nami wangijaha.
What I can say then is that there was a second person there who was carrying a knife. Why would I then say there was no person? There was a second person and that person went out with me and chased me.
Yeah, but you further cannot describe him, that person. The second intruder.
Manje ukuthi angikwazi ukumchaza umuntu kusho ukuthi wayengekho yini.
Does it then mean that there was no person if I'm unable to describe him?
Yes.
Ngibe ngikushilo ukuthi angimbonanga kahle.
When I have said that I didn't see him properly.
Shuthi wena ufuna ngichaza amanga ke manje.
Then you want me to tell lies now.
Well, another friend of Meyiwa's also gave the same version about the two alleged intruders, and just like Zandi Khumalo, pointed out accused number 2 as one of the men who was inside the house.
Now, at
the time that Senzo had pushed or pinned him against the wall, he had grabbed or held him on the upper arm. There's a demonstration here that the upper arm was actually grabbed and pushed or pinned against the wall by Senzo. So Senzo grabbed that upper arm and pushed it against the wall or pinned it against the wall. And that was the right arm that he pinned against. I don't want to keep on saying the second suspect. There is this accused person that is being pointed against by the witness. He had grabbed.
Nilo. Can you stand up? Yeah. So why Bambelo?
Yeah.
Yes, because
that's the very.
Yeah.
That's the very person. Now if you go Asha.
Yeah.
Even myself and I went and threw some blow.
Because after I
had thrown the blow against him, then there was a gunshot that went off.
Well, Mahlala was later grilled on why he never told police about the description of the second suspect, but pointed out accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, in court. Well, this is 9 years after the tragedy. And then, explosive details from a cell phone data analyst, Colonel Lamberta Steyn, who testified that there was communication between accused number 5, Fisokuhle Ntuli, and Kelly Khumalo in the run-up to Meyiwa's killing. Well, Steyn testified that Ntuli called a number registered to Khumalo on the 2nd of August 2014 and the 15th of October the same year.
During my analysis, I discovered that Kelly Khumalo with a number 27827 044 358 received a call from Ntuli Nkani with the number 27733 059202.
Just read that first name.
It's Fisokulu.
Fisokuhle.
Sorry.
And if written in brackets 5, what does that indicate?
It means a suspect 5 in front of the court.
And then the bombshells kept coming. Steyn testified about cell phone linkages between all the accused except number 4.
Given this picture, is there an indication as to who the central figure is, who the central person is?
It's not possible to determine. I can just determine that the suspects in front of the court knows each other. They did talk to each other. But if you look at suspect number 5 and suspect number 3, they did speak to each other. So I will say that's going to be, according to my opinion, the main people.
And then a SIM swap was done on Meyiwa's phone a day after he was killed. But under cross-examination, Steyn was forced to concede that nothing from the data he obtained pointed to a conspiracy to commit murder, and that a number which linked accused number 5, Fisokuhle Ntuli, was not recorded or registered in his name. But in another twist, another police officer, Constable Sizwe Zungu, placed all 5 of the accused in the Vosloorus area on the day that Meyiwa was killed. Well, Zungu's nephew lived at the hostel, described how the accused disappeared from a gathering and hurriedly returned carrying firearms.
Accused number 1, 2, and 3 came in following each other. It was quite clear, or they were showing that they were in shock and they were fast going towards Gwabini's room. I stood up and followed them, and just before that, upon my arrival, I placed my firearm in Gwabini's room.
In my bag.
But just before you saw them coming and following each other, when last did you see them?
For some time, although I won't be able to recall, but it was for quite some time. Yes. Accused number 1 was carrying a firearm of a 38 revolver.
And accused number 3 was having a 9mm.
Accused number 3 was in possession of a 9mm.
Well, this evidence is also crucial because per Constable Zungu's testimony, it points to all the accused knowing each other. Well, Zungu also detailed how accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, had changed his jacket upon return.
As I went out, I saw Mafika standing there at the corner.
Yes, which accused?
Accused number 2.
Accused number 2. I then noticed that he had changed jackets, that he was now wearing a grey jacket from a black. He then looked at me from underneath the jacket as to whether could I see him. He then went past and went into the very same room where the others were.
Constable Zungu testified that accused number 1, Moses Bia, informed him of Meyiwa being killed and that there had been a celebration on their return.
Thereafter, I had my own knowledge where I was now sure or certain that indeed it was them.
If you say it was them, who are you referring to?
From accused number 1 to 5.
And why do you say so?
Because of the incident that happened on the day when I was there.
Yes, which incident?
Yes, that they came back and they had firearms and celebrating his death.
Yes, how was it celebrated?
With a bottle of whiskey.
But the accused denied ever being at that location.
Both accused number 1 and 2 will deny that they were at Gwabine's place on the 26th of October 2014.
And that is just a lie.
Accused says that he never went to Busuthu hostel in Vosloorus, as we have said. From around 5 when those pictures were taken, he moved to his place where he was staying in a flat in Johannesburg, CBD.
But there isn't anything that I can comment about because you are telling me.
Okay. Accused number 5 also denies any involvement in the commission of the offense in this matter. No comment.
Oh, no comment. No comment, yes.
And the details of what happened that day were chilling. Pathologist Dr. Johannes Steenekamp, who conducted the post-mortem, testified about how Meyiwa could have possibly tried to push the gun away, which was pressed against his chest, and could only have survived seconds or minutes after the bullet entered his body.
Situated just below the skin, blackened granular material consistent with gunshot residue are noted in the underlying soft tissue. So when I opened this wound and explored it, I noted this black granular material, and then in brackets, I came to a conclusion following the examination of this wound. I said this wound is consistent with a contact bullet entrance wound.
And even more shocking, the ballistics expert testified that the bullet recovered from the crime scene was fired from the gun confiscated from accused number 3, Mthobisi Mncube.
So in simple terms, what does this paragraph mean, 9.1?
Paragraph 9.1 means that the bullet that was recovered from the firearm, from the crime scene, was fired from this firearm.
Criselda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.
Now, on the morning of August 31st, South Africans woke to the news of a deadly fire which engulfed the illegally occupied Usindiso building in downtown Johannesburg. The fire, which started in the early hours of the morning, claimed 76 lives, including 12 children, and left several people displaced, forcing them to seek refuge at shelters for the homeless. The blaze and loss of life sparked outrage from residents who bemoaned the city of Johannesburg's failure to reclaim hijacked buildings. But some officials who visited the scene of the incident placed the blame on human rights organizations for constantly rushing to courts to obtain interdicts when illegal occupants are evicted from hazardous buildings.
Thursday morning that will forever be engraved on the minds of South Africans. On this day, firefighters had their hands full, battling a blaze that burnt 3 stories of the 5-story building. As the fire raged on, some managed to escape by jumping out of windows in a desperate attempt to escape the blaze. But others remained trapped inside the burning building.
We were back
as it was promised by our chief, that we will be coming back today together with the South African Police K9 unit to try and sweep the whole building. That's it happened already. The K9, they went in already, they're done. So we've got our crews who went in there. So just to sweep from floor 1 to floor number 5, just to make sure that it's clear. After that, we'll be handing over to South African Police Service for conduct their further investigations.
The deceased were laid on the side of the road next to the burning building, while some family members cried out for help as they continued to search for their missing loved ones.
I'm looking for my daughter. She stays in this building.
What have you been told so far?
No, I met some of the people that says she was in the building. But then everybody was running for their lives.
Some of those who were lucky to make it out with their lives slept outside the building with nowhere to call home. Those who feared deportation refused to go to homeless shelters provided by local government.
A moment that was emotional to many of us. It was indeed a moment of sadness. When you have to walk through the street and you witness the tragedy of people having lost their lives in such large numbers.
Representatives from different political parties visited the scene. Some lashed out at human rights organizations for taking the city of Johannesburg to court when inhabitable buildings are evacuated. But the South African Human Rights Commission in Gauteng challenged government to change laws concerning evictions.
If we think about why that law was put in place, we go back to apartheid, where people or a landowner would wake up in the morning and arbitrarily evict people, and that is the purpose of PI. And all we are saying as the Human Rights Commission is that when cities make bylaws, that they comply with national legislation, and this is the same legislation which is made by parties sitting in parliament. And until such a time that they're saying that this law is no longer working, then they know what needs to be done in order for that law to be removed.
President Cyril Ramaphosa also visited the scene of the fire and described the incident as a tragedy.
There are restrictions, impediments that stand in the way. For instance, when it comes to accommodation like this, when a building is condemned and when we can find alternative accommodation, we go through too many processes, too many regulatory impediments that then can lead to this type of situation. And so Parliament needs to look at this.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi subsequently appointed Judge Sisi Kampempe to chair a commission of inquiry to probe the circumstances that led to the fire and the prevalence of abandoned and hijacked buildings in the inner city. The commission sat briefly before the proceedings were adjourned indefinitely and later reconvened. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has warned that if a national coalition is formed following next year's national and provincial elections, it will be problematic for the economic policy formulation. He has further warned that the coalition will likely undermine the efficacy of any budget process. SABC News spoke to the minister on a myriad of issues, including fixing public finance, the NHI bill, as well as the new effective date of the two-pot retirement system.
If you look at all other economies, for instance, Japan's debt to GDP ratio is about 200. No one questions that because the problem, the economy is it's got the capacity to service that debt. Our story is a growth one in the sense that while our interest costs are going up and the performance of the economy is going in the other direction, and therefore make it a challenge to deal with that fiscal situation. But what we have done, as I'm saying, is that we were trying to do a fiscal consolidation strategy which will make sure that by 25-26 we stabilize, and then thereafter that debt to GDP ratio is going to go down.
But, like you say, the issue of growth continues to elude us. Do you think enough is being done at a structural reform level to help catalyze the growth that we need? Because remember, we also know that even before we had a real crisis in terms of energy and even the logistics situation, the South African economy was still not growing even before those issues became more prominent.
I mean, I normally use 4 issues which we need to tackle, which now we see we're mobilizing everybody and business behind those issues. The first one is the electricity issue. You will see that since 2008 to date, we've been having a stagnant growth. I would argue that there's a correlation between that growth and the performance of the electricity sector. Now we've been joined by the logistics sector, with there's also crime. I must add the state capacity. As we sit, we publish every quarter what is called a Section 32 report, which shows how governments are performing. Already we're seeing a 9 billion rand in the half of the year. We're seeing a 9 billion rand overspending. I don't know how we're going to sustain that moving forward. So your issues, those are the 4 issues in my view that need to be tackled.
And then what about at the municipal level? We know that municipalities are just not doing a good job. In some instances, they're not spending their allocations at all that they need to for infrastructural development and all the rest of it. And this impacts on business confidence and people not wanting to invest in certain areas, job growth, etc.
It talks to the 4th point I raised of capacity issues at that level. And I'm saying capacity at all levels, even at municipalities. Again, even with municipalities, we publish every quarter Section 71 reports, which shows the performance of those municipalities. I would imagine a critical aspect of that is how do we make sure that we can help develop this capacity at all levels.
It does seem quite ironic, Minister, because you talked about partnering with the private sector in order to get things going, to deal with some of the bottlenecks in the economy. But then now you have the NHI, which seems to almost seek to disenfranchise the private sector. We know that the NHI bill is now in the President's in-tray for signature to pass into law, but many prominent business people, including the likes of Adrian Gore, who's the head of Discovery, has said that the NHI, as things stand, is not going to work without the participation of the private sector. Is this not a concern for you? Because ultimately, you can't have the public sector footing the bill of something that's going to be as costly as the NHI.
Let me just say there's some dishonest in debating this issue. As things stand, as subsidize the rich and the middle class 34 billion rand per annum through their medical aid. Now, when you say the same facilities must be extended for the poor, people are saying it's not affordable. My sense is that what we need to do is to have a rational debate about this thing. And I suggest, though, I suspect even the people like Adrian Gore are not saying don't have NHI. They have got special problems about one particular way of implementing it. I think the general agreement, NHI has got to be implemented. And therefore, we cannot afford to subsidize the rich and the middle class, but we can't subsidize the poor.
Doesn't it make sense to fine-tune the inadequacies of the system before it's passed into law? Because once it's passed into law, it becomes more problematic.
Let me just say, once it's passed into law, it doesn't mean you'll have NHI on that day. What it does mean, you have got a framework within which you can implement it over a time period which government will have to craft.
Why give Transnet a guarantee as opposed to a capital injection? I mean, you've been more than generous to Eskom, and surely Transnet is equally important as Eskom. Why?
Even Eskom, it has taken a while to arrive at that decision. As things stand, we are looking into the numbers, how Transnet is going to perform in terms of their numbers. We're engaging them with that. What we've done is to say between now and March, to give them a breathing space, we need to give them this guarantee while we are looking at the broader financial numbers of Transnet.
So we got learned that the two-pot retirement system is now going to come into effect in September 2024, and that's after you had some discussions with the Finance Committee around instituting it at a later date to accommodate the private sector. Are you satisfied with the outcome, and do you think that the retirement fund industry should be able to have all its ducks in a row for that date?
Let me just give an indication that if you are going to pay this amount of money to people who are going to place it in people's system, it's a huge amount. First, it has got tax implication, and therefore SARS has got to be ready to be able to execute that. They are amending their system. The second thing, the biggest pension fund in the country, the government pension fund, originally was not meant to be part of this two-pot system. After a long debate with the unions, we have now brought in the biggest pension fund, the government pension fund, into the system so that also public service employees must also benefit in that. They are not also ready with their systems. So what we have done is to say, okay, everybody has got to put their systems in place. Come 1st of September, everybody must get his money.
So next year is an election year, and it is said generally by analysts that particularly in developing nations, the Treasury tends to relax a little bit with the spending reins during an election year because of pressures. What's your response to that, since you've always been banging on about fiscal consolidation?
Let me just say the budget I'm going to table on the 21st of February next year will not have an impact on the elections. So for us, the budget will not be influenced by that outcome, because it can be too late to influence any electoral outcomes. It's going to be a budget as normal.
Minister, one of the things that's quite important for South Africa, we're a very small part of the global economy, but one of the things that's important for us is our trading relations and so on and so forth. We know that the geopolitical environment currently is very unsteady. And of course, there was a lot of reaction when we learned that Petro SA has partnered with Gazprom Bank as an investment partner to get their Mosul Bay refinery going again. There are concerns that, of course, anybody who's associated with Russia these days may be open to sanctions. There are concerns that South Africa could, fall foul in that regard. How concerned are you around how South Africa positions itself and with whom it associates with, such that we don't, the gains that we get from those partnerships are not minuscule relative to the losses that we can have if people decide to withdraw because sentiment says that we're doing the wrong thing?
Let me just say, first and foremost, I accept that because of our colonial past, our economy is too embedded to the Western world. And as a result, our most trade is with the Western world. But there's nothing that prevents us from trading with anybody. What the Americans will take action on is if we are doing a business with a company which is sanctioned by them. As far as I know, Graskop is not part of the sanctioned list, and therefore I don't see any problem in that relationship.
Minister, assuming that you are the finance minister next year after the election, but we have a coalition type of setup at the national level, what do you anticipate that will look like from a policy point of view? Because we seem to have been getting, we've always had good policies, but the implementation thereof has always been problematic. Isn't there a concern that should that day come where you have to work with others who have a different ideology to yourself, that might slow the pace of reform that we're seeing already?
I'm praying. For now, I'm working on the assumption that the ANC is going to win. Any coalition, we've seen it in a municipality, is a disaster, create instability. We can't afford to have a president every 6 months. That does not work. So I think South Africans will vote for stability in this country. That's my prayer. For now, we'll vote for stability. But let's assume that happens, your assumption. It's going to be a problem because budget is about informed by your policy choices as a government. Now, if you've got a conglomeration of people who are going to sit around, discuss different policy statement is going to undermine the efficacy of the budget process.
One last thing, Minister. There've been rumours about your health, that you're not well and all of that. You look as fit as a fiddle to me. But can you just, be open with us to tell us, are you okay?
I'm okay. You know what happens is that after the medium-term budget policy statement, I wanted to take leave for a couple of days, but I combined that with a normal checkup. And then people then all of a sudden that I'm not well. I'm fit as a fiddle, as you say. I'm right up. I've been to the G20 compact with Africa in Berlin after that. So I'm up and running. I'm ready.
Up and running and ready. Now that you mention global meetings, one last thing, COP28. Are you satisfied with the outcomes that have come from there? Because it seems as though every year there's a lack of meeting of minds around the way forward to deal with the issue of climate change.
There will be, and I've not fully understood, I didn't go even attend it, but the normal division is, I would characterize it by somebody who said, kicking away the ladder. The developed world developed their economies by polluting the world, the planet. They are then saying, please don't pollute, don't do what we did, we're kicking away this ladder, don't do what we did. And they are also not prepared to compensate us for that loss. So that's a debate that has always been in this discussion of climate change.
And that's where we leave it for today. We're back next weekend. Take care.